amazing time for learning, and you have some terrific resources in the Jackson area. And of course, it's an extraordinary and challenging time as well. And so we want to help you understand how the learning opportunities have adapted to this time to be of best help to your kids. And we got a great group here to help us with that. And I'm going to introduce everybody really briefly, and then we'll get into some questions. And I want to start with Skye McKay. Skye is a junior at Wingfield High School, and she is an award-winning student, the Jackson Free Press Amazing Teen Award this year. And so she'll be a key source here of information. And Kimberly Campbell, who's a parent, but also the executive director of the Mississippi AARP, and she has been in political life very prominently and has a great perspective. We also have John Johnson, who's the principal of the Obama Magnet Elementary School. He's also a parent. He's got a 7th grader. And we've got Robert Langford, who is the executive director of Operation Shoestring, which is very prominent in year-round learning, both summer learning and out-of-school learning during school time. And Aisha Nyandoro, who's the executive director of Springboard Opportunities, which is an organization that's really gotten national attention for how it engages the community in identifying what residents want and need, and then being responsive to that. And so that gets into both learning opportunities and a whole array of other supports that families want. And so thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. And it's most important to start with the student perspective. And I think, Skye, everybody's probably curious as to what you experienced when you had to make the shift from being in school to learning outside of school. What was that like?
It's something that you have to be very disciplined for, because it's easy to get distracted. It's easy to procrastinate, and it's actually like it's hard to it's like you have that classroom experience when you're at school, so it's like your teacher is right there with you, so it's easy for you to ask questions and stuff instead of just emailing them. So it was a cool experience, but I personally I like the classroom experience better.
Yeah. What would you give advice to parents on about coping with your kids?
Stay on your kids and encourage them to get their work done and go ahead and finish the school year strong. And that's pretty much it. Great.
You're going to be heading into your senior year pretty soon, right?
Actually, this year I'm going to be a junior, so I have 2 more years left.
Got it. Okay. So what are you hoping for this summer? What do you hope to be able to experience?
I just want to be it's going to be my first year being a cheerleader. So I hope I'm able to experience all that. And, because the football games, you have to have a football game in order to cheer. So I hope I'll be able to experience that. And also I model through my school. So I hope I'm able to still continue to have fashion shows and also be able to come to school and be able to hang out with friends at school and be there with my teachers, so it'll be easier to grasp information and ask questions.
Yeah, that's terrific. And Kimberly, as a parent, how many kids do you have, first of all?
I have 3 daughters.
Ah.
So life is really interesting in my house.
Yeah. And what ages?
I have this next school year, one would be a senior in high school, one would be a 5th grader, and then one would be a 3rd grader.
Yeah, terrific. And so what are you hoping for them this summer?
I think what I'm hoping for them is what we do every summer, which is more enrichment, more summer enrichment. Ironically, I think it'll be more than just enrichment, since the last school year, was really online. So I think we've got to do a little bit more this summer than what we would normally do, because I believe that there's still some gaps with the way the year ended. They didn't get full instruction like, we would normally have. So I think that's going to be a challenge. I think me personally, what I'm probably more concerned with is the inequity that some other families may have. I think those, whether it's from not having internet, like in the rural community, or not having technology like devices, or not even having people, family structure at home that can even really help guide them through certain type of learning, modules. And so I think what COVID has done is really peel back the layer to some extra disparities in our educational system. And that concerns me for a lot of families.
Yeah, so we really should dig into that in terms of some of the questions that we're asking today. Yeah, okay. So let's just take a look, first of all, in terms of what's happening with the schools in terms of their support of summer learning. And John, maybe you could give us a little bit of an overview of what the schools are doing, how they've organized for this, and some of the special accommodations that they've made.
Yes, sir. Jackson Public Schools has established Summer Boost program, and where students that have been recommended or have their recommended by their teachers at the schools, the school level, they can log in to a program called Freckle. Freckle falls within the lines of Clever, and that's Clever is a site that's secure, that the district uses, that holds all of our information in it. Freckle has access to programs in math, ELA, social studies, and science. Normally, there would be some type of diagnostic with Freckle, so that you could see where the child, as far as where their learning lies, what we can best use to help that child where they are. That diagnostic produces an algorithm that says, okay, this child is on the first grade level. These are the items that will best help the child learn. This is one of the things that we are hoping will be a major resource for students this summer.
Now, as somebody that is technically challenged, the questions that come to my mind are, so how do parents actually use this resource? How do you actually get your hands on it?
The good thing about it, Freckle, especially like K through 9, like the students are already aware of how to log in and use it. The teachers that will be teaching the courses through Summer Boost, they're there to provide help and support through Zoom with the students. So, and the kids are familiar with their login and their passwords. So it's information that's relative to them.
That's
so, and they also have the option to email the teacher, email various people in the district that if they have help, or they can do those things. The district is also taking steps to provide devices for parents at the school level. Just the last week or so, all the schools have picked days where parents that needed technology, they could say, hey, I need technology from the school. And those were days that they were able to call the schools and come by, sign out computers so that they could use for the Summer Boost program. Now, to kind of echo what Kim said earlier, connectivity is an issue in some areas. So that is still a concern, but it's also an opportunity for us to look at some other organizations, some other ways that we could reach out and help as far as providing connectivity to parents.
So what are some of the ways that parents actually can get that connectivity if they lack it at home?
Different businesses, different areas that have Wi-Fi, that's one way that could be used. It was interesting, I'm in a professional development now, as I spoke of earlier, and in a school district in North Mississippi, they have used
You frozen up a little bit.
If I may, I think I know where he was going. I can add a little bit to that. He's correct. In a lot of areas, whether it was churches, I know around here, some churches would say you can come to our parking lot, you can get our free Wi-Fi service. Some libraries did the same thing. Some schools did the same thing. So I believe that that's probably where he was going. And so that's some of the silver lining that I think came out of COVID-19, was really seeing the community come together and try to, work together to try to help those that do not have those services, do not have the internet, or even if they have the internet, they don't have the right internet speed to really do the type of work that's in place. Legislatively speaking, a lot of work that I do with my professional hat on with ARP has been really to push broadband, especially in those rural areas, because those are some areas to where there's really nowhere to go, or the travel may be too far away, and it may be a transportation to even getting to that school or getting to that church, if there is even an entity that has it. So, so we still got to work on the disparity in certain areas, but I agree with John. I think it's wonderful for those other entities that have come together and have offered their speed and their services to help the families.
Yeah. Okay, that sounds like that's work that has long-term value. So that's good. John, I also wanted to just ask a little bit about how summer learning in this way is maybe different from the school year learning. What will kids experience that may be different?
Well, in obvious terms, the face-to-face instruction is what's missing. But the value in that also is that with online learning, you use the platforms of Google Classroom, Zoom, you're still seeing your teacher, you can still receive instruction, and that's still a major part of helping kids be successful. So whereas we're not in a building together, we can still communicate and learn from one another through technology.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's look at some of the community resources that are available. And Robert, maybe we could talk a little bit about Operation Shoestring, and it'd be great if you could describe your organization and a little bit about just overall what you do and how you do it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So we have been around since 1968, really founded out of the civil rights movement. And the sort of initial impulse was to create opportunities to keep kids safe. And that's both literally and figuratively what our work is about 52 years later. And for us now, what that looks like is after school and summer programs, particularly in one part of one high school feeder pattern. We're in the Lear High School feeder pattern and serve students at Galloway and Walton elementary schools. And we do a lot of, and it's very straightforward after school programs focused on academic success, having a strong linkage with the school day. So a good relationship with the schools and the administration and the staff of the schools and the administration of Jackson Public Schools District, following best practices for what most successful school programs should be. And I've got to have that linkage with the school day, that effective linkage with the school day. And also connecting with the parents, with moms and dads and aunts and grandparents, the guardians of the kids. And so lots of sort of parent classrooms have our own version of a PTA, which is a group that meets monthly. And so it's not rocket science work. It's being there to support kids and families. And that, that all sort of we're rocking along until middle of March. And I think in Jackson, it was really March 16th, that first Monday after spring break, if I've got my dates correctly, when the bottom dropped out. And I think we, like everybody, had a very momentary kind of panic. What do we do? And we very quickly realized that we needed to figure out how to safely continue to serve our kids and families. And I'd be happy to talk a little bit like that, because it really shaped up and teed up what we did this spring, and then the launch of our virtual summer program, which actually effectively begins today. So
yeah, I'd be really interested in hearing how you made that transition, how that does carry forward into your summer work.
Yeah, and it really echoes a lot of the things that John talked about, that the school district and that Obama is doing. So one of the things we did was to do an assessment with our parents. We have a great team who has great relationship with what's roughly during the school year about 250, 240 kids and about 150 families between those two schools. And so over the course of the 2 weeks in the middle of March, and it took 2 weeks to really have good conversations, telephone calls with all of our families to determine kind of what their assets and liabilities were in the context of COVID-19. What were they concerned about? What were their food needs? All those kinds of things. What were their internet? What was their internet situation? What was their device situation, right? It's not just the connectivity, it's also the actual platform that and the device that you can use, because there are a lot of platforms that work on one device, but they don't work on a cell phone. And everybody has a cell phone, but not everybody has a iPad or a Samsung tablet or, some sort of better computer. So sort of working with our very able team to tease that out. So we did that assessment. We came up with 3 priority areas that fit with our mission, and that we could really work on and make some headway on in partnership with other folks. We are an organization that's always done its work in partnership with others. We don't have the resources, we don't have the expertise, and we don't have the mission to do a lot of things that we need to partner with others on. So we looked at adequate nutrition as one priority area, and the school district immediately jumped in and started providing meals 5 days a week, worth of breakfast and lunches to meals for kids, and we were able to get some funding from a number of folks to help support those, in particular to feed the adults in homes that were over the age of 18. So that made a lot of sense to us, and we directed all of our families to go to one of the feeding sites that Jackson Public Schools had set up. So that was one of the areas, the nutrition piece. The other was the online learning, the education piece. And we learned a lot about what worked and what didn't work, sort of along the lines of what John was talking about that the school district was doing. And we also realized that as the district was finishing a lot of its work, trying to get kids to do the work that they need to do to finish the semester, that online learning for a variety of reasons was sort of working and sort of not working. So so we'll talk a little bit how we retooled that for the summer program. The third piece was to figure out how to provide supports to families, particularly parents. And that really looked like weekly calls and almost twice weekly texts to families, checking in, see what was going on with them, realizing that everybody, I think, was sort of dealing with extraordinary anxiety and stress because of the way that COVID-19 was affecting particularly low-income families of color. And so figuring out what were the best practices that we could offer up to our families, and also just being an ear, listening, and because sort of fighting the isolation that was particularly, I think, awful in the first 6 or 8 weeks of the crisis. So we experimented on that, and we've just launched really a retooled version of that for about 150 children in almost 150 families, 220 children, and almost all in the linear high school feeder pattern. I can talk a little bit about what we're doing, but one of the things that we learned, interestingly, about the internet was that my assumption and our assumption was that many fewer families would not have access to internet than actually do. Only a handful didn't have internet. And we're covering the cost for our summer program, essentially June and July, for that handful of families on a reimbursement basis. And it's very inexpensive if they qualify based on income. I think either $10 or $20 a month for most of the internet service providers. But where we saw there was a huge need was in providing devices. And so we were able to have enough resources to provide, I think it'll be about 80 little Samsung tablets that we will lend out to our kids and families to access some online learning that we're doing. We're not using Freckle, we're using another learning management system called Canvas, which a lot of schools and school districts use. And that's a great sort of nexus for everything from using Zoom to YouTube videos and all that kind of thing. So really excited. I can get more in the weeds about that, but I have talked nonstop for too long. But we're excited to see how that programming will work Monday through Friday through mid-July, and really in hopes of building a pilot that we may have to use in the fall if we're not, if the science looks like what it looks like to me right now. So
yeah, and I want to circle back to you on some things in a moment. What I'm really impressed by in hearing all of you is how you have been, almost creating some whole new systems on the fly and very quickly. And Aisha, I'd really love to hear your perspective as the head of an organization that really takes its marching orders, if you will, from the residents of the community and understands, what people need and want and in the way they want it. I'd love to hear what you are learning about what families are searching for in the way of support this summer for their kids and just overall too.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And you're right. So, I am very fortunate to lead Springboard to Opportunities, and we're based here in Jackson, Mississippi, but we do our work in a couple of different states. And we are focused on working with families who live directly in federally subsidized affordable housing. So to give you context of the demography of the families that we work with, our families are considered to be extremely low income, making about 200% below the poverty index. And so to provide further context as to what that looks like, we're talking about individuals who make on average $11,000 a year. So they're supporting their families with those incomes. And so what we are hearing for families, quite frankly, as it relates to the summer, but then also as the school year was ending, it really is always about access. And we're having conversations about access now because the majority is having access issues. But for so long, the families that we work with are being in the minority and having limited incomes, they have always had access issues. So summer challenges have always presented a problem when we're talking about summer learning and summer enrichment. And that access has always been very relevant and real. The unfortunate reality is that now, since it is impacting more families, the families who are considered privileged and middle income, we are now finally willing to have those conversations more broadly. We're now saying, how do we make sure that everyone has access to broadband? How do we make sure that everyone has access to devices? But our families have been sounding the alarm on these inequities and these inequalities for years.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't been listening, which is why the organization that I run even exists. We exist simply to listen to the needs of extremely low-income families that live in affordable housing and support them in that. We have been doing this work for the last 9 years. And like I said, if individuals were listening to our families, I wouldn't have an organization that I have the privilege of running. But that hasn't been the case. So we're here now, and what we're hearing from our families is that the gap of the inequities are wider. And they are widening. So we talk about, Jackson Public Schools has been doing a tremendous job as it relates to making sure that families get fed and summer feeding and school day feeding and those things. But if I don't have transportation, how am I supposed to get to a feeding site? The school did a tremendous job of transitioning to distant learning, making sure that individuals have access to those gadgets. But we still have to have the deeper conversation. Okay, if I am living in a home with a parent who's an essential worker that's still working 12 hours a day, who is supposed to help me get on this platform? Who is supposed to help guide me through this school day? Or better yet, if I am being parented by a grandparent who technology is not their second or third language, who is supposed to assist me. And so we're not having those conversations. We're doing what we unfortunately do a lot of times is we grapple at what's easier and we say, okay, we can solve that. Let's go solve that. But we have got to be solving multiple things simultaneously as it relates to COVID, because like Robert said, COVID's not going away. We are now trying to lull ourselves in this sense of security that, okay, since the economy is reopened, these schools are going to reopen in the fall. The reality is, if we're being truly honest with ourselves, the schools probably will not be opening in the fall. So how do we really go about making sure that we are supporting our learners, not just learners who have parents who have big mouths and know how to get heard, not just learners whose parents have access to the technology. How do we really get to a place that we are retooling our educational system so that it truly works? We keep just trying to say, okay, let's adapt to this normal. No, we don't need to adapt. We need to retool the system. How are we creating systems where, okay, our teachers, our educators are going out into the communities and making sure that parents have access to what it is that they need? It shouldn't be the sole responsibility of a parent to figure out how to download the app, to figure out how to get to the school. It shouldn't be me and Robert's responsibilities with our organizations to be calling each individual parent to make sure that we're checking in and filling in those gaps. We really need to be thinking about how do we retool the educational system to work for the entire family, and not just educationally working for the families, socially and emotionally working for the families, because we've not even talked about trauma and the role that we're seeing this is showing up and playing in these communities. And I feel like there's a whole other webinar and town hall meeting that we need to have, and we can talk about what we are seeing firsthand, how we're trying to address that first for our parents, so that they then can have the language to address that for their kids.
Right.
Out there.
So I don't want you to stop there. I want to ask you another question. So what I'm hearing you say is that many more families are experiencing the kind of challenges that very low-income families have experienced for a long time in this environment. And so the time is right for some sustained work on problems of access and support that have been around for a long time and need attention. What advice would you have for everybody that's watching this town hall to help that conversation along, to get their voices in the mix, and you know, and avenues to be heard?
You know, I really think we need more conversations like this. So kudos to Ira and his team for really pulling together a diverse panel that has representation from the students, the educators, the organizations, the parents. So I think we need more conversations like this, but I also think we need more diversity in what the individuals who are comprising these conversations look like. I love the fact that, you know, Ira and his team asked me to come represent Springboard. I could have very easily had a parent of Springboard come have this conversation. So we really need to be tuned in more and listening directly to those who are impacted, and not just the gatekeepers. Because it's one thing to be a gatekeeper, you know, to have a seat at the table and advocate for those with whom you work. But it's another thing to have your voice, to be that person that this is your lived experience, and someone actually saying, okay, we really want to hear from you. We want your trusted voice to be heard, and we want to go about working with you in partnership to make sure that we are lifting up and acting on what it is that you're telling us you need. Because our families right now, that's one of the things that, you know, we had a focus group last week that United Way was a part of, and some other our partners. And that's what our families are really telling us, that they are so thirsty for right now. They want to be heard by more individuals, and thus the individuals who are always listening to them. So they want to be heard by more folks than just Springboard to opportunities. They really want to make sure that folks are thinking about them and their needs and factoring that into the equation, how we go about pushing these systems forward and pushing these changes that are necessary down the road.
Yeah, I mean, in our work on education, I've always found that parents and the grandparents and the students are some of the best thinkers about how a system could be created that would be better.
That's right.
And so, so that's something that we should take forward from this conversation to find ways to have students and the families be able to express what they want and need and actually participate in the discussion of how to design that.
And Stephen, I think the honest to God reality is we don't have to find the ways. The ways that exist. We just have to be willing to have those conversations and then be brave enough to act on what it is that we hear.
Great. Okay. Now you touched on something, Aisha, that I'd like to explore a little bit further, and Robert, you too. And that is the whole, social and emotional aspect of what we're going through. And Sky, I'm going to put you on the spot for a second. I'd really like to hear your perspective of, as you, adjust your expectations to what's happening in this environment. What are you experiencing in terms of your feelings about this and the things that you may struggle with? And what are you hearing from your friends that they're dealing with?
I feel that everybody was just happy that we didn't have to go back to school. But as far as the online learning, it causes a lot of stress and a lot of frustration. But I feel like as far as the stress and the frustration, everybody was just happy we didn't have to go back to school.
And so the frustration comes in terms of like figuring out how to properly use the technology and just navigate your way through it?
Figuring out how to use it, like let's say your computer or your phone isn't working, so you miss a live conversation with your teacher, so you have to get caught up. And let's say like you don't understand, you're not grasping the information, and you need help, stuff like that.
Yeah, which I would imagine feels a real sense of urgency when that's in real time and you're missing out.
Yes.
Yeah. Robert, what you talked about the social and emotional aspects of what you see in kids and how you're supporting that aspect of their experience and their learning. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say for us right now in this remote place, it's a lot about listening to and trying to deal with the isolation and the pressures that that parents or guardians are having to handle. Having your children at home, you may or may not be an essential worker, but you're absolutely trying to figure out how to make ends meet. And you are concerned about your own health and the health of your family and your loved ones, and for low income communities, the impact, the now impact and the long-term anticipated impact of the economy on your own life. I mean, and just our broken healthcare situation in the United States and in Mississippi in particular, all of those stresses. I mean, we don't have a panacea for that. Sadly, we're not alone in that. And I think going back to the point that Aisha mentioned, just speaking of conversations, creating the place to listen to our parents, and then more importantly, to figure out how do you act on what's being communicated. And part of our role is to be a conduit to connect with people who are social and emotional learning sort of experts. But we have been, this is the COVID-19 is a right now problem, but it only exacerbates the inequities that have been here for a long time. So we're figuring out how to respond in the middle of this crisis to things that have existed for a long time. They're just exacerbated by the current health crisis.
Yeah, I mean, that's such an interesting part of this conversation, to hear this aspect that we're now, things that have existed for a long time, problems and inequities are really asserting themselves. And it's a time where being responsive and being organized and being responsive is more important than it may ever be, ever been. John, as we're talking about these kind of challenges families are facing. You're in a position to hear what teachers are facing in terms of their challenges. What are you seeing in terms of what they're having to cope with, and the efforts that they're made to respond to that during the summer period?
I think one of the things that, as a leader, that's the burden that we bear with our faculties, with our businesses. You want to make sure that the people that work with you, that they're okay. And one of the things I do is we have a group meeting. Of course, my teachers have my cell number, and they know they can email me, call me, and I just take the initiative to make those checks to make sure that they're okay. We know that the work has to be done, and there are things that we are doing to prepare for the fall, but if emotionally and mentally you're not there, that's not going to help anyone. And they have the same concerns as everyone. I mean, childcare, what is that going to look like as we return back to school? Will my child be safe? And as a parent and also as a leader, I have those same concerns about sending my child back to school. And my wife and I, we have a son that's a senior in college. So, we're looking at it from those terms also. So it's a lot to think about in terms of with buildings, how we're going to come in and how we're going to clean, how we're going to teach food service, how to prepare meals, custodians. Are we going to work with companies to help them learn how to professionally clean, disinfect, those things? Those are all on the minds of everyone. And there's just so many uncertainties right now. But one thing I can say is that, COVID has provided us a platform to have a conversation about how we can fix some of these inequities. And I think that's the biggest positive I take. There are challenges, but there are also things that we can do to try to put some things forth to make some things better for everyone.
Yeah. I mean, so one of the things you've referenced just then was the whole issue of just the enormous uncertainty, ongoing uncertainty. And what is being done, or what can be done to increase the level of communication? Because it sounds like what's necessary is for families, students, and their parents, their families, to be able to express their concerns about what's going on and to know where things stand, even if even in the face of uncertainty. So I'm just putting this out to the group. What can be done to make sure that the level of communication back and forth with families is as high as it can be?
I think.
Robert,
Go ahead, John.
I think one of the things, and I thought about this, what Aisha said earlier about, we're used to being the ones that everyone comes to communicate what's going on. I think this is good. This platform is good, but allowing others that are actually going through the actual struggle of not having connectivity, not having laptops, not being able to provide meals for family today, and not just today, but right now, that I think allowing them to speak, to hear that what they have to say, I think that's going to be very important going forward, because I can easily talk to parents and they can tell me what they need, but it's a different look on everything when I have that parent that can tell you, hey, look, I'm going through this. This is what I need. This is what helps me sleep at night. And I think that's something that we have to look at, trying to make happen for the parents.
And I was struck by Aisha's comment that many of the challenges that families are facing are very practical challenges that have solutions potentially to them, but they have to be heard.
Right.
Would you like to add anything to that, Aisha? It looked like you were going to say something.
Oh yeah, I don't know if I would say they're practical challenges. Some of the systemic issues that we're seeing as it relates to inequities in education and systematic racism and all of those are not really easy challenges that can be addressed. But what I will say is that we have to be willing to hear the conversations. And then what I said is we have to have the bravery to act upon those when individuals are honest with us. I think what John was saying, though, just then really makes a lot of sense, and having the platform where we can hear more broadly from individuals where this moment, their lived experience is much different than those of us who are on this call. And I think that's important not only from those of us who are responsible for taking that information and acting upon it, it also will be very empowering for other families to recognize that they're not alone in this situation, and that this
Right.
challenge, even though it is very unique, it's not an isolated challenge. And I think that goes a long way with helping you think through, your self-care and your wellness and how you can show up and act and be responsive when you just know that, okay, what I am feeling, the stress of having to figure out how to parent, how to raise my kids, how to still work, how to educate, how to do all of these things, when you realize that you're not the only one experiencing that. Because a lot of times what happens is you think you're in it by yourself, because it really does feel isolating and suffocating. And so I think that the platform being open and having conversations more broader will serve dual purposes, not just for those of us who are trying to figure out how do we retool these systems, but also for those individuals who need a community to recognize that they're not by themselves. So.
And that in turn helps give people the confidence to amplify their voice when they know they're not alone.
Right.
Yeah. Robert, what were you going to talk about?
Well, yeah, I think Aisha kind of put her finger on it. So what are the things that we do to combat isolationism? And I was really going to talk about the students. And one of my colleagues, thank God, texted me and helped me fix this response. But one of the things, and it is dependent on having the technology and the networks, which is a systemic issue, right? So, and we are fortunate enough to be able to do that for a tiny group of kids and families. But this morning, for the kids and families who had access to it, they had Zoom meetings and they talked about how they were feeling, how they missed each other. These are the kids, right, talking. And so they're providing that opportunity to not be isolated and share their feelings, and to realize, she's feeling just the same way I am. So that's Aisha's talking about sort of on the sort of more family and adult level, and certainly works for the kids as well. So creating the sort of the forums and the opportunities for that, and then figuring out what and how to do with that is really important as well.
Yeah. So that's really clear. And Kimberly, coming back to the whole issue of summer learning, one of the things that families face as a challenge is how do you create a program that's responsive to your kids' needs, where they are in life, what their interests are and their aspirations are, what they need. What do you see as the kind of struggles that parents experience as they try to do that, just overall, but also given this in particular in this environment?
Again, I think I'm probably just saying a lot of the same things that you heard from Aisha, that you heard from John. It's a different battle when you are really in the foxhole, when you're really a parent that is really struggling either financially or just childcare. We also look at if we have to continue this through the school year, and jobs are open. It's not like before where everything's shut down. So mom and dad were able to be at the house. But if we're talking about a situation where schools are still at home, but everyone has to go to work, that's a different issue. I'm in a situation where I could say, I could have somebody at home. That's not, it would be a difficulty, but it's not something that would just rock me. Everybody cannot do that. So you're talking about a situation where you would then have somebody to say, what am I going to do with my children? I've got to go to work. I may be a single parent, that's got to go to work. And so now you're talking about my child will now be at home again from 7 to 3 by themselves, and we're talking about, from kindergarten on up, and so I think we need to have some deeper conversations. I feel lighthearted to say, that I have a difficulty trying to figure out the summer for my children when there are others that are really dealing with some really deep-rooted, inadequacies and some issues. It's one thing to be in a school district where you're just kind of, you have numerous resources, you have a school district that is really staying in great communication with you, to where every single teacher is responding to you every day, several times a day. The district is responding to you on a weekly basis. JPS is doing a great job. John does a great job. Unfortunately, that's not every district. That's not every teacher. I'll give you just a quick example. And again, I feel as though my example it's like having first world problems compared to when others have third world problems. But I'll give the example anyway. I've got 3 children. There were sometimes during the day to where all 3 of my children would have a Zoom meeting or a flip guard or something at the same time that I myself am having something.
Yeah.
And so in my house, then you're talking about, well, somebody's got to have the cell phone, somebody's got to have the Chromebook, somebody's got to have a laptop, and we can make it happen. But I'm thinking, and I thought about it then, what are other families doing though that are having this? When you're talking about now, we're talking about a situation where we have 4 or 5 devices in our household. Again, everybody does not have that as a luxury, and we're talking about this was for true learning. This was not extra credit. This was for true learning, for things that they had to get done. So maybe a little bit off topic, but again, I just think the discussion needs to go deeper for those that are really experiencing the disparities, and then not just for them to have a voice. I agree with, again, Aisha, having a voice is empowering. All of us on the panel, those of us that have children, we're the loud talking parents. So our children are going to fare well because you are going to hear from us. And then we're going to physically show up. But I think there needs to be something to make sure things are in place for parents that do not feel as empowered, that feel a little, less than or insecure when they even have to call a teacher or call a principal. So I think, we need to go from the discussion and probably start having, even some outreach, even some trainings to say, hey, mom and dad, this is what you can do. These are your rights. This is what you should expect from your school district. And if you're not getting this, or if you're not getting this from the principal or not getting this from the teacher, this is what you then can move and do next. I think some real tangible things have got to get into the hands of those that may not have the resources that we have on the panel, that may not know who to call. Like Aisha knows everybody to call if something's happening. John knows everybody to call if something's happening with his child. I know everybody to call and their supervisor if something is happening with my children. Everybody doesn't know that. So I think we've got to go really deep with giving them true, tools to say, we don't want you to just have a voice, but we want you to be backed up. We want you to have some tools to really know how you can better assist your children, how you can have those resources. We need to start talking about now, if we don't go back. We're all thinking that already in my head, I'm trying to figure out what all do I need to have in place if we don't go back. I need to make sure I understand what's happening with my children, even with the divided schedules. My daughter is at Madison Central High School, and right now they're talking about they may go Monday, Wednesday, half students, or half students Tuesday, Thursday, or half, or a fourth would go 9 to 1 on Monday, Wednesday, and the others would go 1 to 4. And so even in that is madness. So, that's a whole other layer of trying to figure out their schedule. And I've got 3 children at 3 different schools, upper, lower, and high. So, again, my issues are not important. I get that. So I'm not trying to say that my issues are what other families are having. But because I know what I'm dealing with, I know that is more severely impacting some other families. And I just want to get us to a point to where we can try to think about what resources can we as a community put in place to help those families and to make sure that they have the tools to not only feel empowered, be able to act on that empowerment when they need to for their children.
Yeah, and from hearing what you're saying, I'm also thinking about those families where the parents are working multiple jobs, and just exacerbating it. One of the big issues that you're raising here is the need for greater partnership between schools and organizations and families than there have ever been before. And we just have a few minutes, and there was a question that Scott was for Sky, and I wanted to add to it a little bit. The question was how do you feel in terms of being safe with the idea of going back to school? And so first, just ask you that.
I feel kind of worried about how they're going to handle like all the kids and like what are we going to do as far as being in the classroom all in one space together, and I'm just concerned about that.
Yeah, understandably. And this idea of having, much more back and forth information sharing between schools and parents. Is that something you'd love to see too?
Yes.
Okay, that's terrific. And we have another question, which is what age is most appropriate to leave my child home alone? This is something that's kind of an agonizing question for parents to wrestle with. Does anybody want to try to help with that answer? That's a very, very tough one.
I think it's okay, like around 13, 14, when they start getting in that little, where they finna start high school, so they have to start maturing. So maybe that's what I think.
Mm-hmm.
If I may add, and again, I'm one of those those parents that does not believe you tell somebody else how to parent their children and run their household. So I'm not going to give an age, but because I know what's going to happen in my house. But I do want to say this, and I understand that everyone does not have a choice, and again, that goes back to what we've been talking about, of the issues that every parent has. But I do want to really encourage that if your child has to be home alone, I sincerely ask that first you really check every resource. Can Robert help you? Is there not, a place that they can go? Does John know some after school? Does Aisha, really search out other resources to keep them from having to be home alone. And then if they just absolutely have to be home alone, then I really do want parents to really make sure they've got true safety protocols in place. I don't care where you live. It is unfortunately a dangerous world. And the internet has made it even more dangerous. And,
right.
Children, as much as we try to teach children about cyberspace and cyber people, they track, they talk to everybody. They're thinking they're talking to a 12-year-old in Atlanta, Georgia, and it's a 52-year-old sex offender that's right down the street, and he's on his way. So, even though you taught your children all these safety measures, and so, again, like I said, I'm not going to tell anybody what to do in their household. I'm just asking that you really try to find resources, especially we're talking about young children, especially, really try to find resources to help them not have to be there by themselves. And if they have to, then really try to make sure you've got some good protocols in place. You have a friend that can check on them, that's in the neighborhood, that can drive by. How often can you physically check on, the mother in me always get just so worried, because it's just a dangerous world. But again, I get it. I know everybody cannot make the choice of saying, my children don't have to be there, or I can hire somebody to be there. I fully get it. So I'm not, talking about anybody. I fully understand that.
Okay.
I'm just asking that you try.
Yeah, and you're raising a really tremendously important point. And I want to end, we're coming to the end, but Ira, if I could turn to you a bit on this. What Kimberly has referenced is that, families there are resources that families can turn to, and they need to know how to do that. And so for families that want to access, for example, Aisha's resources, Robert's resources, John's resources, what action can they take that is relatively easy for them to do to give them the access? And are there other ways that they might turn to, for other help, other places they could turn to?
Yeah, see, that's a great question, and it's a real critical one. I think for us, the easiest way is to simply dial 211 on your phone. So United Way sponsors a statewide health and human service resource database and call center called 211 Mississippi. And it works just like you would dial, for those of us a little older, dial 411 if you were trying to find somebody before you could just Google. You just dial 211 from your phone, and it goes to our call center, and we've got thousands of resources in that call center, ranging from food pantries and shelters to after school programs that you can call and get access to. We'll let you know where they are, what their criteria might be, who they serve, and give you the referral to those organizations that you can go to. We have it ongoing, all 82 counties across the state, and we encourage people to take advantage of that resource.
Counseling services would be among those as
Absolutely.
well. Yeah. And so even if you don't have internet access, you can start with using your phone, dial 211, just explain, this is my situation. I need help in figuring this out. And there are people that can guide you along to that.
Yep.
Okay. It is exactly 2:00 my time, which is outside of Boston, 1:00 your time. And so I think we'll have to stop here. What I'm struck by is that this is a discussion that the United Way is making possible that is tremendously important and that needs to go on, and to bring the family voice into this and build almost like a new system of communication. Maybe one of the great opportunities that arises out of this time. And I really appreciate the thoughtfulness and the expertise that you have all brought to bear, including Sky's expertise as the student who really knows what's going on. And so thank you very much for this opportunity to talk with you. I truly appreciate it.
Great. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody on the panel, for your time and your expertise. We could not have done this without you. Just a couple of notes really quickly, and I'm going to switch back over to my share screen so that everyone can see. The first thing I'll mention isn't in my prepared notes, but we talked about the issue of access and equity. And one of the things I wanted to mention was that, right now in the state legislature, there's a debate in terms of how we utilize the CARES Act funds, which is over $1 billion that went to the state of Mississippi. One of those conversations revolves around how much of that should we and can we invest in education, in terms of modernizing what we're doing, in terms of making sure, to the point that was made in this forum, that students and families who do not have access to the basic resources needed to engage in distance learning get access to those resources, whether that be devices, whether that be access to internet and broadband. How do we make sure that no student is left out in the cold when they have to go back home again, which inevitably will happen again? And so I encourage you to contact your representative, your state senator, the Philip Gunn's office, Delbert Holzman's office, the governor's office, to advocate for funds from the CARES Act to go towards solving the equity gap that exists within so many of our communities regarding the education of our children. So I encourage certainly everyone to do that. We'll sign off by saying a few things very quickly. One, I just wanted to let everyone know that we will be having additional town halls. We've got one each of the next 3 Tuesdays. So it'll run all the way through the month of June. Our next town hall is next Tuesday, and we'll cover the effect of COVID-19 on small businesses in our area. And then on the 23rd, we will cover economic mobility and financial resources available to folks. And then on the 30th, we'll talk about childcare and early childhood development, which is something I think that's been on a lot of people's minds. Just as a reminder, all of the town hall events will be at noon. Will be live streamed on Facebook, and we will have recordings of each of these town hall events available on our Facebook page and our YouTube page. So if you're not available to join us live, then you certainly could take advantage of the recorded sessions. Lastly, we've got a reminder about 2 really cool ways you can continue to support COVID-19 efforts for United Ways across the state. One is by purchasing a Better Together Mississippi t-shirt, which specifically supports Mississippi United Ways, and the funds for that will be distributed to United Way's local communities from where the purchase happened. And every United Way who gets funding gets about $6.60 per t-shirt to the local United Way. The other is a really cool way if you're a football fan. The NFL shop, and NFL's partnered with United Way to offer Stronger Together t-shirts. You can buy them in your favorite team. So if you're me, you'd buy a Pittsburgh Steelers one, but you may buy New Orleans Saints, or Dallas Cowboys if you're really a fan. But those funds go to the United Way Worldwide COVID-19 fund if you want to support that work this way as well. And then lastly, again, I want to thank all of the panelists. I want to thank everyone who participated, everyone who gave your time to be a part of this forum today. We couldn't have done it without you, Steve Greeley, Kimberly Campbell, Robert Langford, Aisha Nandoro, Sky, who just got back on. We certainly appreciate you being here. And Mr. Johnson as well. And we want to make sure that everyone knows you're part of this conversation, you're part of this work. Please visit our website at myunitedway.com or follow us on Facebook and Twitter. And with that, we will end today's session. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.